This is Toronto, our city, a young metropolis gaining size so rapidly that one can hardly keep pace with it. There is no time to stop and consider, for the undercurrent of urgency is always at hand, and the driving force of speed is paramount. To a stranger, our city presents a bewildering sight of order and chaos, ugliness and beauty, so that he is understandably overwhelmed by the multitude of sights and scenes. Toronto has grown so rapidly that the daily influx of traffic from our broad highways has difficulty in finding room in the busy downtown area. Hundreds of thousands of cars cover our roads and streets. All races and creeds may be found in this wonderful city, jostling each other for room. And of course, room is difficult to find when it comes to parking a car. Each day, larger and better buildings seem to spring higher and higher to the sky, and even the hardy Torontonian is continually surprised at the changing face of his city. And as day turns into night, there is no slowing of the tempo, for the movie theaters, taverns, bowling alleys, nightclubs and theaters are thronged with the bustling thousands in search of amusement. And as the night brings to life the neon signs and the glittering theater marquees, the eye of the man in the street is continually attracted by the bright lights on every side. And famous names shine from every corner. But let us go away from all this speed and light to some quiet side street. We may find a lonely lighted window. Inside, we find a child, like this. Not everybody can hurry in our city. Out of every 1,000 children born here, 4 are born with cerebral palsy. It could be your child, it could be anyone's child, rich or poor, whether they live in the city or whether they live in the country, and neither child or parents are to blame. Cerebral palsy is caused by brain damage prior to or during birth or sometime later. The result is that the child may have difficulty in walking or talking or moving his hands. We now know that cerebral palsy amongst children is second only to polio in incidence, and the numbers are much greater than was at first thought. In Toronto alone, it is estimated that 400 children suffer from cerebral palsy, and what is done to help them? In the centre of Toronto stands St. Paul's Church. Many of you must have passed its doors, little thinking what lay behind them, for it was here that the first start was made in the fight against this problem. Until 4 years ago, there were many cerebral palsied children in Toronto who were receiving no help from anybody. At this time, Bishop Wilkinson was approached by Mrs. Sutton and Mrs. McCarthy, who came to him with the object of setting up a cerebral palsy training center where the children of parents who could ill afford the expense of individual treatment might come together for training. At the same time, the parents would be relieved of the domestic ties imposed by their children's disability. Of course, there was need also of professional workers and many volunteers, but the main problem was to find a suitable room. After all details had been discussed, Bishop Wilkinson gave immediate help by offering the partial use of a Sunday school room at Morris Cody Memorial Hall. high ceilings and beautiful windows of the room made an instant impression, and it was agreed it was an admirable place at which to start work. For a start, 2 mornings each week were set aside to provide organized recreational therapy for palsied children. Though the first group comprised only 10 children, today there are nearly 30 children who are receiving formal education, treatment and training. Here we see Mrs. Condy, the director of the center, with one of the young patients. They have probably started their morning with a song and now have a period of free play. As far as possible, however, this play is directed at using muscles that need training to accomplish the tasks of daily living. The professional and volunteer workers find much patience is needed to gain the attention of these children. The purpose of this occupation is to help the boy to learn simple skills that most children can do with little teaching, so that he may become as self-sufficient as possible. The colored blocks make it more acceptable to him and therefore more consistently practiced. This is a long and costly program, as it involves very specially trained staff, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists and academic teachers. There is no known cure for cerebral palsy as yet. The patients can only be taught to control their muscles by those other than normally used. By using a detour often, it becomes a highway. Progress is slow, sometimes discouragingly so, but time is not in the child's favor. The earlier that diagnosis and training is started, the more can be expected, and in certain cases, deformity can be prevented. Cerebral palsy, of course, is a muscular and nervous condition caused by damage or malformation of the motor centers of the brain, and it is possible that any or all of the limbs may be out of action completely. This diagram will help you to further understand the various types of cerebral palsy. The picture on the left shows the normal movement of a hand from position A to B. Compare it with the next one, which shows the usual movement of a moderately affected spastic. Notice the overaction and discoordination. The third picture illustrates severe spasticity, and the last one shows a rhythmic tremor movement which worsens as the goal is neared. The second diagram indicates first a mild ataxic condition, which deviates, overshoots, and then has to compensate, and severe ataxia, a worse form of this condition. The 2 remaining pictures illustrate the inability to keep still, which we call athetosis. It has been said of athetoids that they are prisoners in a framework of unwanted motion. This little girl is handicapped with spasticity, and she must therefore first learn to balance with the aid of braces. It is essential that the patient's environment will permit her to gain as much mental and physical relaxation as possible. To help overcome ataxia, some children may be occupied at tables where they are given special support. This helps them to have confidence in standing up by themselves. Watch this young man. While he is playing on the table, unknown to him, his legs are being exercised. The involuntary movements, however, he must gradually learn to control. This patient is a little more advanced on the road to self-sufficiency. She is still confined with leg braces, though, and her spasticity is hard to overcome. The spastics have certain muscles which tend to contract when put under any form of tension. These muscles may be in both arms and legs, or perhaps in only one limb, and it is this group of children who may become permanently deformed if their muscles are allowed to remain in a state of continuous contraction. Let us watch her as she makes a valiant effort for us to see how hard it is to persuade her unwilling legs to carry her along. Once balance has been achieved, the parallel bars which she is using are very useful in practicing to walk, and mirrors play a big part in working with children with cerebral palsy. Particularly in teaching them to walk, as they are found to assume much better posture when they can see what they look like as they move along. Skis with hand grasps are frequently used by therapists in teaching the child to walk. When deformities are prevented, it enables the child to progress more rapidly with treatment and may also eliminate the need for future surgery. The large shoes are to give a wide base for support, and the poles are made purposely taller than the patient in case she should overbalance and fall forward. It should be remembered too that good posture and body mechanics are just as important for the cerebral palsied as for any other child. Here we see a youngster using what is known as a walker. The strength in his legs is now so far developed that he is able to propel himself along. Walkers are not used in earlier stages of training, as the child may push himself around in the walker rather than take steps. When some balance has been mastered, though, it is felt that a movable walker may be used to advantage. Periods of rest are always included in the morning's activities, and it is obvious that the training is in some cases hard. It is necessary for this little boy, making his way along with duck shoes, to have some rest, for he cannot pursue his effort for any great length of time. Specially constructed tricycles are often used to increase the power of the legs, and at the same time the patient seems to enjoy it. Play is a great builder. It builds bodies by putting muscles to work. It builds minds too, for a child at play is inventive and alert. A great step forward was made recently when Mrs. Condy was able to welcome Dr. David McIntosh to St. Paul's Centre in his capacity as an orthopedic consultant. From his findings, the child's treatment is planned, and it is decided which of the various types of treatment will be used and in which order they will proceed. Physical therapy far outweighs surgery or drug therapy in usefulness in improving the condition of these children. From the doctor's directions, the physical and occupational therapists play an exceedingly important part in the education of muscles, teaching of relaxation, and training in functional activities. This boy is receiving muscle training from manipulation of a professional therapist. The sense of relaxation must be preserved at all times. Most cerebral palsied children have within them a driving determination to correct and dominate their limitations rather than to let their handicaps dominate their lives. From then on, as can be seen here, a mutual proposition is arrived at between technician and patient. They both rely on each other's help. A complete cure cannot be generally promised, but varying degrees of habilitation are always possible. Once again, we see a mirror employed over the therapy table, through which the patient can watch his actions and actually see what movements his limbs are making. Learning to walk for the cerebral palsied child is a slow process, and many stages have to be learned before a patient can ever make the first faltering steps alone. In educating these children, it is essential for the teacher to know which type of cerebral palsy the pupils have and to understand something of their handicaps. From a test group of 20 people, originally only 6 could attend regular school. After treatment, it was found that 15 were able to attend school. This was an improvement of over 100%. Extensive patience is at all times necessary, and an air of fun, which is very evident here, is a great help. These are the activities behind the doors of Morris Cody Memorial Hall. A special problem is encountered in arranging that these children can come together all at one time, as none of them is capable of using the public transport. North Toronto Kinsman and Leaside Kiwanis have been of great assistance in providing some of the transport, but as our numbers increased, the problem became greater. If you knew that it costs the centre $350 a month to provide transport alone, just imagine the entire monthly cost of maintaining the centre. While all concerned are justifiably proud of their centre, which has made such great progress since its start in 1949, there is still much to be done to make it the treatment and training centre that is the ultimate goal. More equipment is needed, more trained staff is needed, to give these children treatment and education to the limit of their abilities. That is the birthright of every Canadian child, but it requires your help. When you go with your own healthy children at the end of another happy year to the long-expected Christmas parade, and you watch the clearly expressed emotions on their faces, be thankful from the bottom of your heart. Be thankful, and don't forget these other children. It is nobody's fault that they are born this way, and remember, they could be yours. Help these children to help themselves. For of such is the kingdom of heaven.